Nick, welcome to the podcast. How are you, man?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Excited to
no,
talk.
I'm excited to talk with you, man. It sounds like what y'all are building or operating at this point. And I don't want to butcher the name. Is it Nature?
Naturae. Yeah, very
Nature.
close though.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
See, that's why I wanted to make sure before. Nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, extraction, right? Plus you guys have your own line of vapes and flour and gummies as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, we're expanding into all sort of like the core extract based product categories as quickly as we can. And it's been a very long journey from CBD days and all of the business that we had going on with CBD and through this transition for sure. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into, the CO2 extraction, the various extraction methods that y'all operate under, as well as the Jaunty brand, let's talk
Mm.
about you, Nick. From my understanding, just the high level bullet points, originally from Venezuela, but your family background is pretty interesting. You have four generations taking part in specialty agriculture production. And
Yeah,
is that all in South America or?
yeah, it's all in South America.
Yeah. So I guess it's just
So
in your
yeah.
genes.
I mean, it was sort of like a good enough excuse for me to dive full into the cannabis industry. I felt like I could at least understand roughly the higher vision of what would need to happen with a specialty agriculture company, which is essentially what most companies are in cannabis that have cultivation involved in their operations, which we do. But of course, like quite far removed as well, right? Like sometimes some of my colleagues laugh a little bit because they're like, "Oh, what kind of specialty agriculture?" And like for the past 3 or 4 decades, the main thing that we've been focused on has been water buffalo raising and dairy production. So we've been working with water buffalo and mozzarella production, and believe it or not, like between water buffalo mozzarella production and everything that goes in between of raising a biological being and then taking a harvest from it and then post processing it to add value to it and turn it into a consumer product. There's like infinite parallels, right? Like you can start to like you could take an Excel sheet or a business model Excel sheet for either business and just change some titles and you would be looking at the same thing, right? Like how much am I
Right.
yielding per liter of milk? How much am I yielding per pound of biomass, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, there were quite a few parallels. And then I just personally love cannabis. I've had a passion for cannabis since maybe even too young of an age, but for a very, very long time. And so I saw an opportunity to sort of to take some of that support from my family, let's say, that they'd be able to say, like, well, yeah, I mean, if you take the right advice within a new industry and specialty agriculture, it's by nature like very, very difficult. That's why there's not often commoditization. It's either very new or very, very difficult. And so there's a ton of learning that you have to do alongside everybody else in the industry. And so it's the same things. It's make good friends with the guy that knows this, make good friends with the supplier that's the only one in the country that can do XYZ, whatever it may be.
Yeah, like
Um,
do it the right way, right? Based on the experience, of course, that your family has had. And what a beautiful
yeah,
segue. What a beautiful path, right? Like a natural pathway where like you not only had that knowledge growing up, but like you said, you talked about the passion like you had for cannabis even maybe too early. And so like where did that spark? Like how did your relationship with cannabis come about?
I mean, I would have to say it was primarily recreational, and it was from, I mean, since I was like maybe 13, 14 years old, I just had a ton of interest for it, and I thought it was very special, especially because back then it was a lot more taboo and a lot less allowed, let's say. And so I just I've used it kind of my entire life and to get an opportunity to sort of to start learning more about it and to work with it, and then to potentially even make money working with it, which we'll see if that'll ever happen in this trajectory, was sort of like a dream come true. I mean, we started with CBD, and CBD was already, and non-psychoactive cannabinoids were already an incredibly interesting place for me, but I always saw them as like a training ground for whenever we can finally go into THC.
Right.
Right. And it's super useful training ground, I would say. Maybe one of the best that you could get if you're trying to go into the THC space. Um, but yeah, I don't have like a super inspirational story as
No,
to
no,
why
no. Yeah,
I
I
got,
wasn't.
yeah,
Don't worry, you're not letting
yeah.
me down or anything. I'm just always curious. You know what I mean? Like everyone's path and story is different, so I appreciate you sharing it. Let's talk
Yeah.
about your transition from CBD or hemp, right, to THC licensed markets, particularly in New York where y'all are operating. So, tell me about that transition. Were there a lot of lessons learned from hemp that you were able to carry over? I would imagine so, but then also were there things that were different that you didn't expect from a regulated THC market?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, both of those, yes. The things that were similar were primarily, let's say, in like the cultivation and the extraction in general. Like we learned quite a lot in the non-psychoactive cannabinoid world, and extraction and cultivation. It was really just like flipping a switch for us and adding in a different input, and we were able to produce very high quality distillate oil with THC. What the things that really changed for us were even fundamentally for us, because the business model in the CBD world, we were competing nationally, and we were competing as wholesalers of ingredients essentially. And so we were just, we need to produce at scale as many kilos of oil as we could produce, so that we could dilute our costs of production and sell at a margin into a rapidly decreasing and compressed market. And here, because of the way the two-tier system was structured, we're really compelled to go all the way to a finished product that's being distributed to the stores. So we had added to our business scaled manufacturing of a wide array of finished products now that I think we have to remain competitive as distributors in New York, and in the licensed THC side. And then outside of scaled manufacturing, also obviously scaled distribution. I mean, we're not there yet. There's still not a ton of stores, but it's a really big state, and we're gonna have to figure out the logistics of delivering all those products that we're making to every store. So those two things, like the manufacturing and the distribution, are new. And then to your point on the regulatory side, like in CBD, there was just nobody watching. It
Right.
was really like a wild west. You could sort of it was up to your ethics as a company, essentially. How many COAs did you do? How often did you test in between batches? In New York, we were sort of, it's a benefit now, but at the time it was definitely a hindrance that we had to be GMP. So we had to do quite a bit of this regulatory stuff and compete with guys in Colorado and California in the CBD world that were far from it.
Right.
So it wasn't as tough to transition to THC, but operationally as a team, and like as we've been hiring and etc., it's definitely been this sort of jolt of like, oh yeah, every single milligram needs to be measured here. Now we're implementing BioTrack as a track and trace. And so I would just say generally there's a lot more seriousness around the required compliance and the material that we're handling. I mean, because it is psychoactive, and in our case, very psychoactive, because we've got all the oils, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And is it funny how that works, right? It's like more regulation means leveling the playing field, right? Like actually encouraging a competitive industry that, can really work to produce quality safe products, right? Like in an unregulated market like CB that you mentioned, and I know and live it because we're here in Texas. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's wild, right? Like you don't know
Yeah.
what you're getting if you're, especially if you're buying like outside of a reputable retail store or like from a brand online. Gas stations, I'd stay away from that stuff, right? And then
Yeah.
the chemically synthetic cannabinoids that are coming about, like they're so evolving. Like every day there's a new one, right? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Before we transitioned into THC, just a small digression, we were just generally dealing with a lot of this that you probably see in Texas with all the synthetics, and we were always just constantly blown away, like, oh, there's a new one, there's a new one. I've tried most of them, and personally, and the experience, like for example, with like THCO or THCP, has actually been quite disorienting. Like it hasn't been enjoyable at all. I sort of feel very much like I'm back again in college or high school days, where you would take like these other synthetic things and you would sort of get disoriented, and you're like, I guess this is an enjoyable high, right? I'm not sober.
Right,
um
right.
but when I take something like that with a THCO, I wonder, like, wow, like what was left in here that labs can't even test for, that they don't even know that they should test for. So yeah, I think that stuff is wild, and you guys in Texas are like starting to lead the charge. Like Texas and Oklahoma have some really big facilities that are producing that, which,
Well, and
you know.
it's ridiculous too, like Texas specifically, because like the lawmakers here are making it more difficult for the farmers, right? Like they're almost punishing them in a way. Like that hemp ban that they passed, it basically states that you you cannot sell hemp grown in Texas in retail stores, but it's not illegal to sell hemp flower. It's just that it can't be Texas hemp flower. So you could have, New York hemp flower, you could have so I
Yeah,
mean talk about like just a smack in the face
backwards.
to the farmers, right? I mean,
Yeah,
um it
yeah.
really makes no sense. But I digress as well. I do want to ask you. So you did talk about, the two tiers system in New York. So let's talk about New York specifically, like that market. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening or watching that want to know how the rollout's going with the licensed industry. So tell us about the New York cannabis market and what you're seeing.
So I mean, in terms of the like every, so there's two tiers, right? You've got the first tier, which includes everything from cultivation all the way to manufacturing and distributing a finished product to a store. And then the second tier are the dispensary stores that sell directly to the consumer, right? And so the state, and I would say all of the stakeholders in New York, because they're already working in hemp and CBD, did an incredible job at how quickly they got a significant amount of volume of product uh, uh, cultivated, harvested, processed, manufactured. Everything in that first tier that I just mentioned. I think it's been very impressive how quickly the rollout has happened after all of the turmoil and everything that happened at the government level with the exit of Cuomo and etc. They really got that done quickly. Now, in the second tier, in the dispensary tier, there are unfortunately just a ton of roadblocks and slowdowns, because of the structure that was put forward, the social equity structure that was put forward for the dispensary licenses. Um, it was, I think, put forward incredibly intelligently, and it would be working fantastically right now. And everybody wants to find sort of all of these different reasons as to why it's not, and complex reasons. I think it's a very simple reason, and it is basically funding. Like the state promised that they would roll all of this out, and in parallel to it, to this program that gave dispensary licenses to individuals with prior convictions in with marijuana. They also promised in parallel to be leasing stores, turnkey stores that were going to be given to the licensees, and then that they were going to have a fund that would give them funding for everything to build out the store and to buy their inventory. And since that never came through, and it still hasn't come through, and it's obvious that it won't come through, the rollout has been slowed down by in my opinion, 70-80% of what it could be. Like,
Wow.
at this point in the year, the state had said that there was going to be between 100 to 150 open stores by June. We're roughly at June. We at Naturae, we had estimated that maybe 30 stores would be open at this point, and the reality is that there's 10 stores open. And we're at a rate of roughly like 1 to 2 stores per month. So I think, I mean, that's the real holdup. It's in that second tier, just like stores finding real estate, finding the funding, finding fair deals, which is going to be very tough for a lot of these licensees to find capital. And once that happens and they open up, so far they've been doing an excellent job at operating the stores. All of our dispensary partners are absolutely blowing us away with the numbers that they're doing, and with the just generally how well run the locations are. I just think it's kind of a matter of time. So it's a lot of people are just struggling a lot because this season is coming up again and it's time to plant again.
Right.
And they're not in stores. There's a lot of people competing for these 9-10 stores.
Right. So 9 to 10 stores throughout the entire state of New York.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, which I've mentioned this several times on the podcast. Peter Sue is the one who kind of dropped the number initially, the number of 1,400 illegal dispensaries operating, right? Primarily probably in the city, right? New York City.
Yeah.
So how, first question is, how like are people able to tell the difference? I would imagine from an industry perspective, if you're on the inside, you would be able to know, but how do consumers know? And then secondly, like when we talked about earlier about like non-regulation or enforcement, lack of enforcement of regulation, like how is NYPD doing anything to shut those down? Like what's happening in that capacity?
So in terms of enforcement, there was just a new bill put out where they're attempting to kind of go after the landlords of these dispensaries that are there to try to put stiffer financial penalties, whereby they'll either evict any people that are running a dispensary under them, or any smoke shops that are selling illegal unlicensed cannabis products. It is, I mean, it's definitely incredibly challenging. I mean, I walk into any chance I get, basically, that I see any of these stores, I'll go in, and sometimes I'll even buy a product that surprises me that I want to see. Like I've seen some very sophisticated products, like, beverages that taste just fine, like any beverage that you could find at any other dispensary. And in my opinion, enforcement is gonna be tough, as pretty much every other state has proven.
Right.
However, I think that New Yorkers are like they're just a lot more interested in convenience and the safety of the licensed products. So what I kind of want to yell at the TV every time that I hear a lot of talk about, like, we just got to get more enforcement out there. We got to get stiffer penalties for the landlords, etc. I'm just like, just focus on opening the stores, right? Because if you have accessibility in New York, this isn't like a California legacy market where everybody has their guy that they've had for 10, 20 years. The guy here in New York City or in upstate New York disappears like every few years, and you just get a new one, and there's not. So I think generally, if there would be access, and obviously price point is important here too, but at least start with access. Most New Yorkers are just going to naturally transition, and a lot of those smoke shops are just going to stop selling weed because there's not going to be that many people to sell it to. That's generally what I think the approach should be. It should just be get more dispensaries opened with good operators and with good funding. And in New York, at least, I think this will kind of start to solve itself, because the products are good. New York has already in dispensaries like pretty advanced products.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, even at a minimum, do them in tandem, right? Like,
Yeah, do them in tandem would be the best, right?
I
You could do
mean,
both.
like, do the job and then like do both jobs, right? But I mean, I know
Yeah.
that's a lot to ask. I mean, there's a lot going on, right? But still,
And
yeah, that
to the question, like they are, every weekend or every 2 weeks, I see a post, I see the OCM like walking in with their OCM enforcement outfits and raiding entire places. But the problem is the problem that it always is. Like the head of the operation is never caught.
right,
The
right,
the um the amount of inventory taken is never enough to actually make a dent into the operation. They're making more money.
right.
So that's why that's a tough side. But it's always, I mean, it's better to see some enforcement than just to see it go rampant as it has in New York. Because sorry, to the last point here is that if you Google this dispensary in New York, the first 50 results on Google and on Google Maps are not legal dispensaries. And they have full Google reviews, they have everything, they have online menus, you can order delivery. They have cookies products, Dizzy's products, they have, so It sort of seems like an undefeatable beast again, unless we just get at least a more significant number of stores than 10 stores. But
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, no, your point I think is sound, right? It's like enforcement's not the answer, but it like acting on some type of enforcement will at least help deter because
Sure.
as a business owner and doing the right thing and paying licenses and doing right, I mean it sucks. It would suck to see Google and you're buried at the third page because these guys
Yeah.
aren't and their gals aren't, following the rules. So I hear
Yeah.
it, man. So I appreciate. I would be remiss to not bring it up because I'm just interested as to what's happening. But let's now switch gears and talk about your company. So tell me about what it's like to run. I guess I don't want to say vertically integrated, but no, because vertically integrated companies aren't really allowed in New York, right? So I mean that's that where it comes in that two-tier system that you were just talking about. So is that how they're
Yeah.
distinguishing the
Right.
two or?
Yeah, right. We don't sell direct, we don't sell all the way to the consumer, let's say. I mean, we
Right.
do have the challenge of that our house brands need to speak to the consumer first and foremost, and that's what we're worried about when we're marketing, when we're designing. But then of course they also need to speak to our main customer who's the dispensary and be interesting to them in terms of the price point and how much they can make per unit and the presentation and how much space it takes up on the shelf and the storage, et cetera, et cetera.
Got you. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I appreciate you clarifying that. So, Naturae, I mean, tell me about your business model, your footprint within the state of New York, and and then we can talk about Jaunty, right? And just the whole process of product development, what you're seeing in terms of consumer adoption, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Yeah, so Naturae now is uh, focused essentially on being a distributor for cannabis CPG products. And there were a few different ways that we could look at doing that and in the fast track that we had to do it on from when we got the license to when we had to produce and sell. Because from the CBD days, we didn't have any established consumer product brands, right? We didn't have so we worked with a lot of out of state brands and looked at potentially licensing them and adding them to the portfolio. And as that process went on in 2022, we sort of we took the decision to a little bit more risky decision, but to go with our own house brands and develop them based on the input that we were going to put into them. So Jaunty, which is our current brand that's in the market, we're in 10 stores right now, with our Jaunty vapes, which are our CO2 distillate based 510 cartridges, and then with our Jaunty gummies. Um, and then we went and looked at the other extraction processes that we wanted to have, um, to be a sort of full extract house, and that was solventless extraction for hash and hydrocarbon extraction for live resin. And so we made resonators, which is going to have all of our hash products and all of our resin products. And then finally we made Jumbo Dose, which is a tincture brand that has just very high concentrations of non-psychoactive cannabinoids with THC, sort of as an homage to all of our CBD and cannabinoid days. So we have those three house brands, and the business model was like work with our suppliers, cannabis and non-cannabis, to ensure that we can engineer a product here that's going to be roughly the same price as the unlicensed market that we see right now. So at the time, we would go to the unlicensed stores and we'd see 1 gram vapes were between $45-$60. That's roughly where they're still at today. Our argument was like, look, the black market is like the freest market that you can have. It's a real free market where price points are set based on form factor and usability over time, and they kind of stay there. So $45 to $60 makes sense for a 1 gram vape. And okay, what do we need to do to achieve that? So we need our distillate to cost this much. And so we went to our cultivation partners, and we also have a cultivation license of our own, and we put all that together and negotiated to get our distillate at that price, and then negotiated all of our other non-cannabis inputs for the vapes, and we're able to get them into the market at $55 right from launch, $55 retail for a 1 gram vape. We did the same thing with gummies that are now $24 retail for 100 milligrams of gummies. And that's the same thing that we're doing on the hash side as well. It's just it's a very simple business plan. It's recognizing that we're already years into legalization, and there's large established markets all over the country, and we need to have our pricing match that and make sure that our costs still allow us a margin. And through all of that, essentially provide high quality in-house brands that sort of round out a portfolio that solves an issue for the dispensaries. For the dispensaries, it's okay, these guys provide my high quality extracts. Okay, great.
Right. It's a long-term partnership, right? After that negotiation, it's like, look, every time, because this is what we do. I mean, our products are gonna remain consistent. It's gonna be the
Yeah.
same experience every time, right? So, let's agree on a price point that works for both of us. And it sounds so basic, but in most cases, the most simple skill is to be simple, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
difficult. People are complex, right? So, I think that it makes sense for you to see a market trend, right, where vape cartridges, like you said, are anywhere from 45 to even 75. I mean, I've paid almost 80 to $90 for a live rosin, cartridge. And so I get what you're saying. And to have something that's of quality, tastes good at a price point that makes sense is great. I even saw the packaging and the branding, and it looks really like a high quality product, man. So congrats
Thank
on
you.
that. And you mentioned the solventless extraction process methods that you guys have incorporated to be a well-rounded extraction facility. So tell me about the
Yeah.
solventless methods. I mean, is it a press, a heat press, or is it the water with ice? I mean, how are you doing that?
Yeah. So it's both actually. So what we do is we'll extract the bubble hash from fresh frozen material. We've got one acre that's in partnership with us that we're contracted with. They grow exclusively fresh frozen strains for us. And so we harvest and we vacuum seal the material immediately and put it into a frozen container. And then it's coming to the facility, every month it'll arrive frozen. We will extract the trichomes off of it, the hash with an ice water bath. And then from there, we'll either use the hash itself for our gummies that are going to be coming out, our Resonators hash gummies, or then we'll take the highest quality hash, which is like the 90 micron, the 120 micron hash, and we will press it with a hydraulic heat press and get the rosin, the live rosin pressed out of it. So right now we're extracting that like every day, and we'll have those products coming to market in the next like 2 or 3 weeks. Super excited about them. I've been probably
Nice.
consuming too much of them. um, because I've never even dreamed of having like high quality rosin extraction going on in my facility. And then when
Yeah.
we planted these
Well,
genetics last
if you need a
season,
tester, I'm available, Nick. Let me,
hey, come
so.
up, come up. We'll disappear in Willy Wonka land up there.
Yeah.
No, but we when we planted the genetics last year, it was sort of a luck of the draw. Like our original plan with it was to do hydrocarbon extraction, and that was delayed because of permitting and etc., as hydrocarbon notoriously always is everywhere. And so we said, okay, well let's look at washing it because we wanted to wash anyway. And we got very lucky with the gentleman who's working with us. He's a killer. He's from California, and he and we were like, all right, let's try it out, and we got like 5% yields, which is a very high yield for a washable strain, and the quality is just incredible. So anyway, we sort of skipped the middle step, which was doing hydrocarbon, and went right to solventless, and got very lucky with our genetics. So it's great.
Yeah. I think I mean, it's a good move, right? I enjoy solventless products. I mean, there's something about the taste,
Yeah.
with the live rosin pen where you really taste the flower, right?
Yeah.
It just tastes very natural. So very excited. Congratulations on the rollout of those new products. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
as we wrap up, Nick, what have we not covered? I mean, are there maybe some trends that you're seeing, or just other maybe issues or things that you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Um, well, I mean, obviously we need to see more stores open. So I mean, from what we're seeing and talking to different card licensees, it looks like that's underway. And I think in June, July, that will be happening. But but no, I mean, I think just generally, I guess what I will say is that I'm surprised in general at how much in New York, maybe for convenience, maybe that's just the general trend that we're seeing. Extract-based products have been incredibly popular here in New York versus what we see in a lot of other states. So
Hmm.
we're seeing extract-based products actually in a lot of stores account for more than 55-60% of the sales versus the inverse, which is what's sort of natural in other markets. So that's an interesting trend that we're seeing, but outside of that, I think everybody's very impatient to see the market open over here. It's New York, so they expected it to be instant. But if we just kind of continue slow and steady and the growth continues, I think by 2024 or 2025, it'll be a very different conversation.
That is an interesting trend that you just mentioned about extract products, 50 to 60% accounting for retail sales. To me, it just
Yeah.
tells me that New Yorkers they're fast paced, right? They're on the go. So it's like, and
Yeah.
I know I'm speaking, I guess, to the city, but um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. People in the Northeast in
No, totally.
general seem to be more fast paced. So it's on the go. Let me get a gummy. Let me hit my vape pen, and I'm on my
No
way.
time to roll an entire joint. Right, right,
Or pass it and
right.
sit down, right? Yeah, either, and it's probably too cold outside to sit and enjoy, right? And you don't want to
Yeah,
smoke
that's
inside.
true.
So there's a lot of variables.
For sure. For
Awesome,
sure.
man. Well, Nick, I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find Naturae's website, social media, if they want to learn more about your services and even the John T brand?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to naturaenewyork.com or johnty.com. And johnty.com will take you to Naturae as well. And you can see on johnty.com all the dispensary stores that we're in, but it should be pretty much all of them in the state. So if you go to any of them, pick up some Jaunty.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Nick. And hey, let's do it again real soon. Okay. Love to talk to you about how the New York market is evolving and, shaking out, and especially how Naturae is playing a big part within the rollout.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you for the time, Kevin. Appreciate it. All right.
Sounds good. Thank you. And thank you all for listening. Bye.